is Chapter 1 of Nutrition 230's Smolin, Science and Applications Nutrition. So how healthy is the typical American diet? We often call the typical American diet the SAD, or the standard American diet. It's really high in processed and convenience foods that are easily obtainable with the hectic lifestyle and low priority that people put on, sitting down and having dinner and breakfast and lunch, but it might not provide the necessary nutrients. Processed and convenience foods contain lots of calories and sodium and fat, but we don't eat enough whole grains, vegetables, fruit, seafood, or dairy products in order to meet our actual micronutrient needs. When we look at nutrition-related deaths in the U.S., most of these deaths are the major killers in our current population, including heart disease, cancer, and stroke, as well as diabetes. Therefore, a lot of the diseases that we experience here in the U.S. could be prevented with nutrition intervention. So you, as future nutrition professionals, are really important in addressing these situations. Some things we want to be thinking about in this chapter are our essential nutrients, which must be provided in the diet. We also want to take note of the concepts of fortification, which are foods that have nutrients added or considered fortified, and enrichment. Enrichment is the process of adding back nutrients that have been removed, such as grains, which have thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, iron, and folic acid added back. Dietary supplements are going to contain one or more of the following: vitamins, minerals, plant-derived substances, amino acids, or concentrates or extracts, and these are regulated at a much lower level than food is through the Dietary Health and Supplements Act. So there are three classes of macronutrients: carbohydrates, which contain 4 calories per gram, protein, which contains 4 calories per gram, fat, which contains 9 calories per gram, and alcohol, which contains 7 calories per gram. These are our major contributors to our macronutrient intake, where carbs, protein, and fat are our 3 essential macronutrients. Alcohol is not an essential macronutrient, but we need to take it into consideration because people are consuming it as part of their total intake. Carbs are made up of starches, sugar, and fiber. And carbs are going to provide, as I said, 4 calories per gram, and their major function in the diet is providing energy. We don't store too much energy as carbohydrate. We store about 2,000 calories in our glycogen stores in our liver and in our muscle, but carbohydrate does need to be replenished daily. Lipids, on the other hand, are a major form of energy storage. We have thousands and thousands of calories of lipids stored in our body, even if we have a really low % body fat. Lipids are made up of triglycerides, phospholipids, and cholesterol, and triglycerides are a major form of lipids in our body and in our diet. Triglycerides contain fatty acids, and different types of fatty acids, such as saturated fat, have negative effects on health, whereas other types of fatty acids, such as monounsaturated fat and omega-3 fatty acids, have positive effects on our health. Next, we have proteins. Proteins are going to be the building blocks of a lot of different structures in our body, and they also are major regulators in terms of enzymes and things like that. Protein can also provide energy, but it's really the tertiary level of energy providing, and carbs and fat are kind of the primary ones, primary and secondary. Micronutrients don't provide energy, so they are necessary for functioning of the body in terms of structure, like our minerals creating our bones, and regulations, such as enzymes and coenzymes and cofactors. Micronutrients are really important for good health, but they're required in small amounts. Small amounts so much that certain minerals are considered ultra trace, and that we need so little that they're really hard to study exactly how much we're getting. Micronutrients are found in most fresh foods, and they might also be added, as we talked about before, in enrichment and fortification processes. Water is a macronutrient because it's required in large amounts, but it doesn't provide kilocalories, so its classification is a little bit different than the other two groups. Water makes up about 60% of a healthy human body, and by healthy it means a body that has a little bit more muscle, a little bit less fat, because the more fat that you have, the less percentage body water you are. So as you can see here, if somebody's about 16% body fat, they would also contain about 16% protein, 6% minerals, carbs, and other substances, and 62% water. Now, malnutrition, although we tend to think about it in terms of being undernourished, can have two different faces. First off, malnutrition can mean undernutrition in terms of energy or in terms of a macronutrient such as kwashiorkor or protein deficiency, or in micronutrients such as vitamin and mineral deficiencies. On the other hand, malnutrition can also be overnutrition. Overnutrition can occur from eating too many calories, which would lead to obesity, or it could occur from oversupplementing from a vitamin and mineral. We often see over and undernutrition in the same person in the US. Often those with the lowest socioeconomic status have the greatest risk for obesity, and they have the greatest risk for undernutrition of vitamins and minerals. When we look at the concept of nutrigenomics, which I've posted an extra article about on your Moodle site, nutrigenomics is the study of how diet affects genes and how genetic variation can affect the impact of nutrients on health. So, for instance, you inherit certain genes that are going to put you at risk for certain diseases. Then you implement some diet and lifestyle activities, and those are going to work together to then result in your health and disease risk. When we talk about reasons that we eat, we are interested in our overall health and disease risk, right? But we also have other reasons that we choose the foods that we choose. We might choose foods because of their convenience and location closest to us. Holyoke is actually considered a food desert, which means that geographically, getting to good food can be problematic when some people have transportation and mobility issues, available income, as well as food storage and preparation equipment. Cultural and personal background are also going to influence your food choices. For example, you might have certain religious dietary laws that might prevent you from, say, eating meat or drinking dairy products or having certain fruits and vegetables. You might also have ethnic menu preferences. Certain foods might not be socially acceptable. And then, of course, there's personal preference as well. You might have an adverse experience to a food as a child, and that can carry on with you through adulthood. There are also psychological and emotional factors that influence people's food intake, as well as health concerns. Nutrient density is really how we're going to describe healthy food throughout this semester. So nutrient density is a measure of the nutrient a food provides compared to its energy content. So when we compare things calorie to calorie, we can see here that sweetened iced tea and low-fat milk both contain a little over 100 calories per 8 ounces. However, that low-fat milk is packed with calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin A, which makes it a more nutrient-dense or healthier choice than sweetened iced tea. So many people are only focused on macronutrients and calories in our society that it's difficult to teach them about the importance of not only looking at calories, but also looking at the nutritional value of that product in terms of nutrient density. To encourage people to eat more nutrient-dense foods, focusing on foods that have less solid fat and added sugar are pretty key. So for example, rather than chicken nuggets, go for the skinless chicken breast, or bake your own chicken nuggets and put some whole grain breadcrumbs on them. Instead of a medium order of fries, bake a medium baked potato, or slice your own French fries out of that potato, keep the skins on, and put a little olive oil on there. And instead of a slice of apple pie, go for a medium apple. And when we look at the medium apple versus the apple pie, those are two very different foods. So perhaps you could, meet in the middle with some apple crisp and use some oats on it. Nutrition is a relatively young science. We learn about nutrition through using the scientific method. However, a lot of the news you see about nutrition in the mass media is more on the sensational realm than the scientific. So making sure that any nutrition advice you give or you believe to be true is based on the scientific method, and that's going to be really important. So you need to make an observation. For example, more people get colon cancer in the US than in Japan. Make a hypothesis about that observation. The lower incidence of colon cancer is due to differences in diet. Conduct an experiment to test your hypothesis. So compare the incidence of colon cancer in Japanese people who move to the US and consume a US diet with Caucasian Americans who eat the same diet. And as a result, you can see here what was gained in this scientific study is that the Japanese people who eat the US diet have the same higher incidence of colon cancer. So then a theory is developed. The US diet contributes to the development of colon cancer. So after that, we need to conduct more experiments in order to support this observation, and then that theory becomes somewhat of a truth. However, in science, truths are always changing. For example, until recently in the dietary guidelines, cholesterol has been recommended to be consumed in under 300 milligrams per day, because the best information that we had on cholesterol was that it raised blood cholesterol. However, recent studies have proven this theory wrong, and now we've taken away the cholesterol recommendations. So the science of nutrition is always evolving and changing, and it's really important as a scholar and as a practitioner of nutrition that we really respect and understand the scientific method, and that we keep up on current literature to understand how things change. So we also want to be very critical of experiments that are done. A well-conducted experiment requires quantifiable data, an appropriate experimental population, and proper controls. Within this, there are a variety of categories of experiments that can answer different sorts of questions. I've put a number of different study type examples up on Moodle for you that you can take a look at. Some of these types are observational studies or epidemiological studies, and they can study health and disease patterns and correlation. Human intervention studies are also known as clinical trials, and those are going to include some sort of dietary or supplemental intervention to compare a control group with an intervention group. Lab studies can be conducted in research facilities such as hospitals or universities, and they might study humans or they might study animals. Now, in conclusion, when you're looking at reliable nutrition information, you want to ask yourself a few questions in addition to, was the scientific method used? First off, does the information make sense? Second, what's the source? Are they trying to sell something? Is it an opinion? Who is a legitimate source of nutrition information? Is it a dietitian, a university, a governmental agency? Who's going to benefit when you purchase the product? Is it based on good science? And has this product stood the test of time? So in conclusion, on this week 1, chapter 1, make sure that you are a person who is sharing and identifying reliable nutrition information. Review your macronutrients and your micronutrients. Make sure that you start talking about nutrition in terms of nutrient-dense foods, however your values may be on top of that. And then get ready for chapter 2. You can take the pre-lecture quiz for chapter 1 on Wiley Plus and the post-lecture quiz whenever you're ready and you feel like you have a good understanding of the chapter and this information.